Hello everybody, I just went ahead and fully finished Mafia the Old Country. It took me roughly about 12 hours to get through, and that's with failing a few of the missions several times. And overall, I am unfortunately a little bit disappointed in the game, but let me tell you why. Let me give you my pros, my cons, and then my final verdict of the game. The first pro is that this is an Unreal Engine 5 game, and one of the only good things that comes out of Unreal Engine 5 is that they are pretty good looking games. And Mafia the Old Country is no exception here. It is a quite good looking game. It has pretty decent lighting. The environments and the texture work in the environments are, I would say, above average, and especially when you get into the cutscenes, that's where this game looks incredibly good. Both the motion capture, the facial animations, the lip syncing, all of that is magnifico. It's really good, man. And I would say that, you know, I was playing this on my PC, maxed out. This is probably like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in terms of visuals. It's a really good looking game, and those cutscenes are fantastic looking once you crank up all of the settings. I would also say that for a pro, the sound design is really good in the game. Both the gunshots, the explosions, the voice acting, all of that is A1, and it even did some stuff that surprised me with audio design that I don't normally see in games. Like when you're riding your horse, depending on the foliage type that you're going out through or the plants that you're going through, it actually makes a different audio cue. It actually surprised me because I went over a cactus and it made a distinctly different sound than when I went over another like bush or a bunch of twigs and stuff like that. So it's a little thing for sure. I'm sure most people won't even notice it, but I do really appreciate that attention to detail, and it does help make the world feel very realistic and immersive. And that's the final pro that I'll say, which is that the actual world here it's beautiful from a graphical level, but it's also just beautiful from a historical and an interesting perspective. You know, this is a time period and an area that we don't really get to explore a lot in games, and I'm not really a history guy, so I know nothing about the really early 1900s Italy. And this kind of just lets you have a little glimpse as to what things were like, you know, back then. It's unfortunate that there's almost no interactability with that world that's been created. And as a result, it is sadly just almost as if you're in a very pretty painting. You know, you can't interact with the different avenues of the painting, and there's nothing really to do in the painting, but the painting itself is still very pretty and very interesting. I suppose one final pro I could say is there were a couple of the missions that I did think were actually pretty entertaining and pretty fun. But yeah, let me get into the cons now, which I don't really know how to say this, man, but everything from a gameplay perspective in this game is average at best, and most of the time subpar. There are several forced stealth missions where if you're spotted, it will be an instant fail, and as you're seeing from the stealth mechanics in the game, these are stealth mechanics we had in Last of Us 1 like a decade ago. And to be honest, it's actually even more clunky than games we had a decade ago. The AI is extremely dumb, so it's very easy to just sneak around. I played on normal. I had some people say, oh, play on hard. It makes the AI smarter. Change it to hard a little bit. It doesn't change anything. That is 100% not true. Maybe it makes them alert to you faster in stealth, but it changed absolutely nothing. As you're seeing from the gameplay, you have to press a button to choke a dude out. Then you have to spam that button. You have to mash the button to choke them out. Then you put them on the ground. Then you have to hold a button in order to loot them. And then you have to hold a button in order to pick them up and carry them around. And it's very clunky. The only thing you have for the stealth gameplay is you can throw a coin or grab a bottle and throw it as a distraction, which is like I said, very, very base level. And even in games I don't consider good, like Star Wars Outlaws or something, you still had significantly more mechanics at your disposal for the stealth sections. So it's very bare bones when it comes to the stealth, and I wish I could say that the shooting was any better, but unfortunately it's not. The shooting is entirely serviceable as well. It's a third-person cover-based shooter, but unfortunately they have opted for a bloom and inaccuracy system when it comes to aiming that is just, it feels really, really bad to play. You know, this isn't like a Red Dead Redemption where you're taking cover, you're aiming and it's snapping to dudes, or even if you do free aim in Red Dead, right? You aim real quick, you take a shot, headshot a dude, then get back in cover, right? This isn't like that, because when you first aim your gun, your crosshairs are massive, and you have to aim for like an entire second. Just stand there out of cover for an entire second while the crosshairs come in. And you can get these buffs, these like little rosary things in the game that that help and that make it more accurate initially, or makes the weapon just overall more accurate. And I found myself running those the entire game, because without those, it didn't matter what other buffs I got. Without those accuracy things, the shooting just feels terrible in the game. Unless you are point blank with a dude, you're aiming and then you're waiting like a second for it to get accurate and then finally taking the shot. And because even when it's accurate with a lot of the weapons, the bloom is still so massive. The crosshair size is still so massive. You can be permanently aimed on a, like perfectly aimed on a dude's head, but you'll just get RNG'd and it'll miss anyway. And on top of that, the fact that when you're holding that for that second to try and get the accurate shot, if any of the enemies shoot you, which, you know, a lot of the times you're having 5-6 dudes shoot at you, it will make you inaccurate again. And then on top of that, there's no setting for aiming sensitivity. So your look sensitivity and your aiming sensitivity are the same. And for me, I play, you know, a pretty high normal sensitivity, but a really, really low aiming sensitivity whenever I play a game. And boy, oh boy, it was rough for me trying to aim in this game. The sensitivity for the aiming was just so high for me, and there's unfortunately no way to fix it. When you're doing the stealth gameplay, I will say you can do fast stealth kills with your knife. This will use up durability on your knife. Each knife has different levels of durability. They have several different knives that you could choose from, some that are better at fighting, some that are better at stealth, and one of the perks even that you can get is to auto loot people on stealth kill, which is awesome. Unfortunately, there's also these little treasure chests hidden throughout the level that also use your knife durability. So this oftentimes leads you to wanting to choke out the enemies instead of stealth kill the enemies with your knife, even though the quality of life is there for killing them with your knife, right? Because you could potentially auto loot, it's faster, it's just a much better feeling system. The players are oftentimes de-incentivized to do so, because that's going to use up their durability, and then they're not going to be able to open up those chests. So I found myself choking people out most of the game so I could open all of the treasure chests. So yeah, and then speaking of knives, there are these knife fights that happen a ton of times throughout the games, typically like in these big story moments. You can think of them almost as boss fights, where you have to either dodge certain attacks or parry certain attacks, and you have your light attack, your heavy attack, a stab. And at first I was like, oh, this is like a much better system than like the Mafia 2, you know, punching system, fighting system. And I do think that it is. However, they just have you engage with this system far too much throughout the game. Like by the end of the game, I was like, please, not another knife fight, dude, because they're not particularly difficult and they all play out the exact same way. You don't unlock any extra abilities or anything like that for the knife fight. So from the very first knife fight that you do to the very last knife fight you do, they are all playing the exact same way. unfortunately. And that's the case with all of the gameplay here. You never get more stealth abilities or any like extra mechanics to spice that up. You never get more shooting mechanics. You don't get some dead eye or something like that. So yeah, just all of the gameplay mechanics is like, they're not bad. They are serviceable or like a little bit subpar at best. Also, I think the game has a really slow start. Now, don't get me wrong. I just played Death Stranding 2. I love Death Stranding 2. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. You know, I really love the game. That's a really slow game. I love Red Dead Redemption 2. A lot of people quit that in the prologue because they say it's too slow. That's a really slow game too. I love Red Dead 2. This game makes Red Dead 2 look like a fucking Bugatti, bro. The start of this game, I didn't even get to shoot a gun until 3 hours into the game. And remember, it took me 12 hours to get through the game. And so, like, a slow start in Red Dead 2, it's not that big of a deal because it's a 100-hour game, right? So it takes me 3-4 hours to really get it going. It doesn't really matter because it's a 100+ hour game. This takes 3 hours to get going. And, like, it took me, like, 3 hours before I'm even in the Mafia. You know, I'm even shooting dudes. Like, that's 3 hours in a 12-hour game is a lot bigger of a deal, right? So a game is much slower paced. I am not particularly bothered by it. Like I said, I'm fine with slower paced games. I love Death Stranding. I'm fine with slow paced games, but I see a lot of people that will probably have the issue with it. Another issue that I have with the game is that the story, the whole story overall, it ends up feeling a little bit like generic Romeo and Juliet. They do a couple unique spins, and like I said, some of the missions I do really like, but overall, like, as I've been ruminating on the entire story, it just doesn't, it's nowhere close to as good as Mafia 2. You know, Mafia 2 for me is like, it's the only other Mafia game I've played. I haven't played 1 or 3. I was told not to because of various things for both of them. So I've only played Mafia 2 in this. But this game, you know, the story is just, it feels far more generic Romeo and Juliet and less mobby, you know, less Mafia-y, actually, than like Mafia 2. So, you know, not the biggest, like, the main story is fine, and at times it's even good. The cutscenes really carry hard, but the overall story, I was not the biggest fan of. And I think for me, ultimately, this game does just end up feeling like it's nowhere close to Mafia 2. And for me, I really loved Mafia 2. I was excited for something along those lines. You know, Mafia 2 is a linear game as well. It's a shorter game as well. But the story and the mission variants and stuff was really fun. In this game, so many of the missions are just, they feel the exact same. You know, there's several forced stealth missions that'll just fail the moment that you're seen. Even if you try and do stealth in a mission where stealth isn't necessarily like required of you, you'll even get like an achievement that's like, good job, you went through the whole area, you know, without anybody getting spotted. But then it doesn't even matter because 1 millisecond later, some dude finds you anyway and starts shooting at you. So you're like, well, what was even the point of doing stealth? You know, it actually like has no impact on anything. So what I would recommend is, if it doesn't fail you for getting seen, just shoot your way through the place, man. And in line with that, I had a couple of situations where you're supposed to stealth, but it's not an insta-fail. So I just started shooting people like I just recommended you to do. I just started shooting everyone. And I would shoot a bunch of dudes. We're in a full-on firefight. I kill everybody, right? Like, I just killed like a dozen dudes. We just slung 100 bullets. I'd walk 2 feet down some stairs, and there was just a bunch of dudes still down there that apparently didn't hear the massive fucking gunfight 3 feet away from them, and they're all just doing their normal patrols in stealth mode and stuff. It's like, this game feels like a PS3 game. Straight up. It does not feel like something that's coming out in 2025 with all of the AI innovations that we've had. Not AI as in like, you know, AI slop generated shit, but I mean like actually the intelligence of the NPCs. It doesn't feel like there's 2025 intelligence in these NPCs. It doesn't feel like there's 2025 levels of like in-depth mechanics in the game. It's very like surface level basic through and through. Now, luckily for them, the game is $50. This is not a full price title, which I think is the right play. But even at $50, I think a lot of people, it's still a little bit too expensive for them because, like I said, it's about a 12-hour game. It's a slow start at the beginning for sure. And then on top of that, there's zero replay value. There's like 50 of these statues that are hidden, which I don't know if you get anything special from those statues, but I do know that even just playing the game normally, I had enough money to buy the best car in the game, the best weapons in the game, and buy the drip that I wanted. So like in just one playthrough, I don't really see the point of, you know, acquiring all these statues or anything like that unless you are like just a 100%er, which if you are, that's fine. But yeah, I think this is a one and done for, you know, 99% of the people playing the game. Ultimately, my thoughts on the game are it feels antiquated, and I don't just mean that because it's Mafia the old country. It's taken place early 1900s. I mean that it feels like a PS3 game. It's very bare bones in all of its gameplay, whether that's the stealth or the shooting. It doesn't really do anything interesting in those regards, and the overall story has its high points for sure, but it ultimately ends up feeling like just another Romeo and Juliet story thrown out there. It is graphically impressive, but it does have a lot of performance issues and bugs. I did crash 3 times while playing through, and that's on a 5090 and a 9800 X3D, a top 0.01% PC. So I've seen a lot of people with weaker rigs struggle a lot harder. Your performance will definitely vary. And I think that the game ultimately ends up being, for me, a 6.5 out of 10. In case you don't know my rating scheme, a 5 is average, 6 is above average, 7 is good. I can't quite get this game to good, man. Even though there are some really cool tie-ins with like Mafia 2, this is definitely in the same universe. Even though it is really awesome to see this unexplored time period and area, you know, of like early 1900s Italy, there's just too much wrong with the game, or too much that's just like supremely average for me to really get it up to a 7 out of 10. And I'm gonna be honest, and this might upset people, but the gameplay reminds me more of Star Wars Outlaws than anything. And even Star Wars Outlaws had, you know, upgrade paths for your sneak. It had your little munchkin dude Nix that you could send out and do various things for the sneaking missions. Even Star Wars Outlaws got rid of the insta-fail stealth sections because people complained. This game has them several times. Even Star Wars Outlaws has like upgrade paths for your weapon and for combat and stuff. This game doesn't even have any of those things, so it's even more bare bones than Outlaws, and we all know how a lot of people felt about Outlaws. So yeah, really the narrative is carrying hard here, and the narrative at some points is really good, but at most points it's just fine. So let me know what you guys think, though. I think I am in the minority here. I've seen a lot of people giving it 8s or 9s out of 10s, and that's awesome. I'm glad they enjoyed it. But of course, I'm always just going to give my honest opinion on things, whether that goes against the grain or not. So let me know what you guys think. I appreciate you stopping by and watching the video. Maybe stop by a stream sometime. I stream over here on the YouTube channel all the time. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see all of you guys in the next video or stream Rudy. Bye-bye.